Hello, everyone. Good evening. This is Jana Machado, and today I will be hosting our meeting. Tonight we have a very special night. We are celebrating our 15th anniversary for the Spiritist Society Seeds of Light. And tonight we begin a 3 day event celebration. So tonight we have our Spiritist educators, Linda Suter and Juliana Savidra, joining us to tell us a little bit about the experience during COVID, the classes and how they did it. And I can tell you all that it was a great success. And then we have a little video, and after we have then a CC. Tomorrow we will have at 7 p.m. of our time, 9 o'clock p.m. Brazil, we have Dr. Alberto Almeida, and then Thursday we have Simão Pedro at the same time, 7 o'clock here, 9 o'clock p.m. in Brazil. So I would like to invite you all to join me with a simple prayer, and then I will bring our friends in the camera. All right. Heavenly Father, Master Jesus, tonight as we celebrate this milestone, we ask you, Lord, that you may bless all the workers, all the people that join our Spiritist Center, so we may continue to work, so we may continue to study and grow together. It's been such a pleasure to be part of the center, and we ask for your guidance, for your intuition always. We also thank all of the spirits, the mentors, the students that join us for our meetings. We thank you, Lord, for another day, for another opportunity, and most important, for this incarnation. We ask permission to begin tonight's meeting. So, tonight, let's see our dear friends Linda and Juliana. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi,
Thank,
everybody.
thank you for joining
Hello.
tonight.
We
So,
are
Oh,
super happy to be here and let everybody know how it has been going, how happy we are to even have a class to teach, to have parents and children who want to be a part of our classes and ask to have more during the week.
yes, that's true. And I'm very happy to be doing the same thing and very thankful to have my daughter, Juliana, doing that with me because she's amazing. Now, she asked for the topics, what we're going to teach. I give to her, and she comes with the best projects ever. And she has the way to explain that for the kids. Just don't have no words to say how happy I am to have her next to me. Now she's
I
uh,
try
wonderful.
my best.
well, I'll tell you, you both do a fantastic job. As we were talking on the backstage, um, the way you guys reinvented, the class, it is something that other spiritist centers, look up to, even though if nobody tells you guys, but they are. And we are happy, and I bet all the parents are very grateful, to have both of you spending time and effort to continue to help our kids to achieve the goal, which is to be closer to God, to get to know Jesus,
Yes,
under the light of spiritism, and that's so
exactly.
important.
And I'm sure they are helping us out too now.
Yes.
And now comes the topic, and here she comes with all the projects. She finds everything just the way to make the kids just fun now, and kids want to do it. They already have the projects. When we open the Zoom, everybody already have it. Now next to them. It's just
So it's like,
amazing.
what's the next one, right?
Uh,
Yes.
So, I was curious to know, how did the two of you come up with the idea of doing, like you did this year? Because this year was a little different than last year,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
Yes, it was different from last year. So with COVID, doing the Zoom classes, it was very new to us. We could go to the center, we could have all our tables and chairs and art supply carts and all our little trays or cups full of crayons and glue, whatever the kids needed, we provided for them so everybody could participate. When we started Zoom classes in the beginning of COVID, we said, well, let's try to come up with the same way we do things at the center, which is videos and books and chit chat with each other. But let's make the project something easy where the parents could maybe have these at home, like pencil or crayon or a white piece of paper, something very easy that everybody could participate in. However, we noticed that a lot of kids did not have these things right off of the bat. It wasn't in front of them at the dining table, or maybe it was in a separate room and the parents wanted to be supervising them and the parents were busy somewhere in the house. So our idea this summer was to have something that was easy enough for a child of 5 and above to be able to open, grab, and do whatever they need to do right in front of them. So the idea was to come up with a very simple, and I have a little example here, just a simple binder. And then we took these lovely here plastic file pages. I'm not sure what these are called, where you like protect your sheets, sheet
Mm-hmm.
protectors, I think. And we printed everything out for them. So we have like a little poem in the beginning about faith, and then each week we would have something new. We put our calendar in here. Oh, wrong page. We put our calendar in here so that the parents could follow along in case if they didn't find it on our group chat. And each week was separated for the child. We also would have like a title page. This week is experiment week. These are the things that you're going to need. Um, we had pages that would say this today is, we had experiments, we had projects, and I think we had one more thing, but I can't remember off the top of my head right now. But
Well,
we all, go ahead.
no, I was thinking here. I remember the one project with I think it was the prayer that you got, like the little
The
stone.
filter.
Yeah, that
Yes, that
was,
was.
oh my goodness. I was like, I
That
want to do that.
that was not me. I wish I had my phone in front of me. But the best part, I think, about COVID was not just that it pushed us to think beyond the classroom
Yes.
and to be able to help each child participate and support each child in what they needed in the moment, but it also allowed me to find other centers who were
Mm-hmm.
trying to participate with their class during COVID. And one of the centers I found was actually in Brazil. I really wish I could remember the name of the
Yeah.
center, but they
Mm-hmm.
are posting regularly experiments, arts and crafts. They're already back in their center, so now they're posting little pictures or videos of what they're actually doing in class. But
Yeah, and
that amazing prayer filter and spirit filter and Perry spirit filter was an amazing video and an amazing way to think out of the box. How can we
mm-hmm.
teach our children to visually understand and relate what's
Exactly.
happening all at the same
Yes.
time? And I
Mm-hmm.
love that I was able to find other centers who are trying like we are.
Yeah, and they really helped us. Now, everything
Yes,
you were asking them, they were sending right away.
right
That's
away.
the way you do it, but now
Yep,
they were amazing.
super helpful.
Mm-hmm.
That was
And
so good.
and the way we plan out the class is more the kids know, more we give to them step by
Mhm.
step. Like
Yep,
last year we did the parables,
terrible. Hmm.
and this year we did tells you.
We were this year, so we ended the year talking about So each parable, we would not only talk about what the lesson is, but we were also talking about who's giving us that lesson, who's teaching us these lessons, who's the one spreading these lessons to us. Because before that, we were learning about the disciples and that we are all choosing to be fishers of men. So within that, we talked a lot about Jesus. So we said, let's start this year by introducing who is Jesus. Why do we keep talking about Jesus? Why does he keep telling everybody all this stuff? And why does he, most of these families have a basis of Jesus in the home. But we wanted each child to actually relate and be able to kind of like hold him as something, like an object, like something holdable, something touchable that they can connect to and would be made on easy terms. So we did an idea of, let's become detectives and let's see, how can we find Jesus around us? Or who was he? What was he trying to do as a person? So we can know the difference between a leader worth following and a leader who's not worth following. How do we become a leader worth following? How do we follow in those footsteps?
That
So
is
that's
beautiful.
what we were trying to teach this year.
Yes. And next year, we are going to go to the Old Testament because
Correct.
a little bit now, all the commandments, and for them to understand how much had to happen for Jesus to be able
Correct.
to come. But no,
More
step
to
by
support.
step. Now,
Yeah,
things they
we're
will be able to
supporting.
understand.
Yes, we're supporting the idea of, why was Jesus telling everybody to love each other? This must be a concept that is a little bit confusing to children, because they're like, that doesn't make sense. We should like everybody. Why is Jesus trying to teach everybody, that we should love each other and be kind to each other and help and give? And a lot of the parables, because they are not modern day, we do explain and teach in honesty what the times were like. Why do we have to be fisher of men? Why are we sowing our seeds? Why what was the last one we did? It was our talents.
Yes.
So we learned that talents have two meanings. It's not just things that we are good at and things that we can try, but they were, a long time ago, they were a way to say money. They're a way to say a bag of gold. They were a way to currency or transfer one thing from the next. So things like that we teach them. So we want to make sure that when we teach one thing, we're finishing that circle. We're coming back around. We're connecting it. So there's no holes anywhere when we're teaching.
That's nice. Well, for sure, you guys did a beautiful job. And I know that, for the coming year, it's going to continue to be very creative and,
Yes.
that even the adults want to be part of it. So, Juju, can you tell us about the video? Because we're going to play the video.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. The video, usually we like to, and again, this is hard because we're on Zoom, we usually like to go to the kids for ideas. What do you guys want to do this year? What do you want to show everybody that we're learning? And because we're all far apart and we don't have a lot of time really on Zoom, what I chose to do was pick one of our days that we were teaching about how to follow in Jesus's footsteps, and how he is not only our teacher and not only our healer, but he is our brother and our friend. And in this song, I was just like, wow, it's simply telling these children how he is there in every single way, in every step, and in everywhere we look. And when the kids saw the song in our class, they just loved it. Yeah. So I asked them, what do you think? Chia Linda also said, this is a great song. Was everybody having fun? And we like to have a collaboration with the children. We like them to participate in what they're learning and what they like and what they don't like. And they all loved it. So we just went along with it. One of the other, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, you say it.
One of the other songs we chose is a song that we've been doing for years now, to teach children that from inside of us comes our light. And it's a very simple song that we all know, which is This Little Light of Mine. and they've been doing it. I think we've had Kiara and Vida since they were 3, so
Yeah, two
they've
two
been
years
doing it
old.
since they were 2. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
they've been
And
doing it since we can
Kiara is
remember.
what, 9 years old now, right?
Yeah, and Vida's 8. So
yeah, and Arthur is what?
Arthur is the oldest,
11.
Yeah,
He's
yes,
11.
11. That's what I was gonna
11,
say. I
and
think
he
11
used to
going
come
on
when he
12.
was 2 years old too.
Yeah.
Christ.
So that was nice
Yeah.
that they were all very happy to participate and sing and dance and show everybody the love and the light they have inside them.
Hmm.
At the
That's
end, we wanted to see how they felt after our classes, like a kind of a conclusion or a summation of the year. Who, after everything we've learned, who is Jesus to them? What did they grasp and hold on to? And it was just really beautiful to hear.
Yes.
oh
Even
yeah.
Arthur,
Oh,
I think
dance.
Arthur's was my favorite. Listening to them, it was just absolutely beautiful.
Hmm.
Oh, Lais just said that Kiara is 8 too. So
8,
Yes.
they were
okay.
so they were together. Okay, so I'm going to play the video and I hope everybody enjoy. And then for the ones who are listening to us, if you could just once I play the video, the beginning is a little, it takes a few seconds for the sound
Yes,
to come on. But
correct.
if the people that are listening to us on Facebook and YouTube, if you can just type in and say if you're listening, because sometimes we may
If
have
you can hear, yeah.
yeah. Okay, so let's do it. Okay.
No, I don't. I can't. I'm not sure, but I can't hear anything, Jenna.
Yeah, it's going to start, it kind of picks up the sound.
Oh, there we go. Hi, Vida.
Hi, Mommy.
Mommy wants to ask you a question, and there's no wrong answer to the question, okay? Who is Jesus to you? How does he make you feel?
Makes me feel happy, and he helps me not think of nightmares.
Mm-hmm.
He heals me, and he is like my pal in my brain. And I love Jesus.
He loves you too, baby. Thank you.
Bye.
Alice, who is Jesus?
Jesus is God. Jesus is life. Jesus is everything.
Emily, in your own words, what does Jesus mean to you?
He's nice and he loves us. And on Christmas is his birthday. And I think he likes presents.
Anything
And
else?
he likes when we are nice to each one another. And he's I call it the master creator.
Yay. Thank you.
Sophia, who is that?
It's Jesus.
And who is Jesus for you?
Jesus is nice and forgiving.
Yes.
He's the one that taught us to be nice. And he always gives people another chance.
Thank you.
He loves us with all his heart.
That's right.
Jesus saved me and he protects me and he makes me feel safe. So for me, he's a superhero.
Hi, Una.
Hi.
Mommy wants to ask you a question, and there's no wrong answer. Who is Jesus to you, and how does he make you feel?
Well, he's a savior, he's a helper, and when he's by my side, it always makes us happy. I love Jesus!
Arthur, who is Jesus for you?
Jesus to me is the light inside of us that guides us to where we need to go to in life. And yeah, it's the light inside of us that we have to let it shine.
Thank you.
Kiki, cadê o Jesus?
Tá aqui.
Esse aí é o Baby Jesus?
Sim,
Ah, você gosta do Baby Jesus?
sim.
Por quê?
Porque ele gosta de mim. Ele quer pra casa.
É. O Jesus cuida de você?
Sim, bebê.
E você cuida dele?
Sim.
Então tá bom.
Happy birthday, Jesus. I love you. Birthday, Jesus! Woo! Happy birthday, Jesus! Happy birthday, Jesus!
Happy birthday, Jesus!
Feliz aniversário, Jesus.
Well, I'll tell you, you guys made me cry. The kids did so good. Oh my goodness. Hi, Luke.
Hi, honey.
How are
Sorry.
you?
He
Well-
had this little light of mine, and that was it. He had to be in the video. He had to see what's going on.
Well, I wanted to thank both of you for joining us tonight and, for all you do for our kids and, always helping the parents, making sure, that they get the binder. We forgot to mention that actually Linda
Yep.
and Juliana, they mailed for every child their binder with all the projects, including everything they would need. And we have Kiara, who's from Sarasota, so which is like about an hour and a half away, and she also joins our classes. And
Correct.
so
And
that's
Sophia, too.
Sophia.
Correct.
Too.
We
Where is
have about
Sophia
three.
located?
We have Sarasota, so we have 3 students that are located in Sarasota right now.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was just
We have
Kiara.
We have one new one that joined this year, like a couple of weeks ago. And then we have like two new ones here in Fort Myers. So that's
Okay.
my favorite part. That even
Yeah.
if we go back to the center, we can just set it up where we can still Zoom in class and they can participate with us. And it's so easy just to fill this up for them and mail it out whenever, the new classes start.
That's
Mhm.
right. Well, I want to really, from the bottom of my heart, and I can talk, I guess, from everybody who's listening, that I can see all the comments here, even Dan, who's on the backstage, is already, kind of also saying, great job, kids. That's a tough act to follow. Well, thank you so much. And we will be sharing the video, separate later so everybody can see it. And thank you, Juju. Thank you, Linda.
You're
I
welcome.
will
Thank you,
be
guys.
inviting Dan
Thank
to come
you.
in, and you can say hello to him before you go. Hi, Dan.
Hello,
Hi.
everyone.
Hi.
Hap-
Ah,
Happy birthday!
yeah, happy birthday, Jesus.
Well, guys, thank you so
You're
much. See you
welcome.
soon.
Thank
See you.
you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Hi, Dan.
Hello, how are you doing, Jenna?
I'm doing great. What about you?
Better now that I saw those kids shaking, dancing, talking about Jesus, doing all those wonderful and lovely things.
I know. Well, we're so grateful to have you also, beginning tonight our celebration, 15th anniversary. And then we'll be talking to us about a very cool topic. We kind of spoke about, by text messages. And I hope that everybody enjoys. And I'm eager, to learn about. So then we'll do like we spoke, maybe 35, 40 minutes talk. And then if people have questions, I hope you all do. I see Nick participating. So Nick, please write your questions because I know you always have some. And so at the end, we'll have, a chance to do a Q&A. All right, then
Sounds
if you wanna talk a little bit about yourself, and then you go ahead. I'll give you the word.
Thank you. I just want to say how excited I am to be here with you guys. It's really wonderful to celebrate 15 years. That's an incredible accomplishment, especially when you consider that this is all a labor of love. These are all volunteers dedicating some part of their lives to make sure that others get, and themselves, of course, get a chance to learn more about our spiritual selves. That's just an amazing accomplishment. Um, I don't think there's a lot that I can say about myself other than I am truly excited to be here. And I am also very excited to always have a chance to talk about Spiritism. And if we get to do both at the same time, celebrate your guys' anniversary and talk about Spiritism, yay, even better. And so, Jenna, you turn it over to me. Can I start or do you want to do anything
You
else?
go ahead. All yours.
Well, thank you. So, hello everyone, and thank you for being here today and celebrating 15 years, which, like we just said, is an incredible mark. As you understand, I have a very tough act to follow. You can consider me the leftovers after that banquet of light that just took place with all those kids. How amazing were they? Just really incredible to see all the love and care that goes into taking care of our little ones that we know are only little in the physical body, but they are spirits just like the rest of us. And how wonderful it is to see all the volunteers spending time talking to them about things that matter. Today, as you might expect, we are going to talk a little bit about a topic that I find very appropriate for celebrations because every time that we have a chance that way, every time that we have a chance to celebrate something that has given so much to us, it might be interesting as well to go back to our origins, to think about how it all started and what does that mean to be here today. So if you will indulge me for the next 35 minutes or so, unless I get really excited and talk a little bit longer, I want to keep it short so that we have a chance to dialogue for reasons that I think that you're going to see and talk about. But for for those reasons, I think it's interesting for us to go back to the origins of Spiritism and remind ourselves of some key things that have happened in the beginning and continue to take place, and make a connection, hopefully, on how that also would, find their way into our lives today. So, if you are up for it, we'll talk about for about 35 minutes, interact, and have a chance to connect the dots between then and now, and what does it look like for our future. All right. So the DNA of Spiritism, what is it? Why does it matter now? Ultimately, that's the question. It's always very interesting to talk about Spiritism to Spiritists, right? And I presume that most of us here on this video call are already very familiar with Spiritism in general. But it's nice to go back in history and just try to figure it out, how it started and what Kardec first defined it as. One of the favorite definitions that I have of Kardec about Spiritism is the one that is in What is Spiritism? And he says that Spiritism is a science which deals with the nature, origin, and destiny of spirits, as well as their relationship to the physical or corporeal world. And that's a really powerful sentence because it tells us many things. It tells us that it's a science, or sometimes, as I like to call it, a body of knowledge that keeps growing because every science continues to amass new information. It tells us that we are going to be talking about the very important topic of spirits and what that is and who we are and how does the spiritual relate to the world that we live in right now as well, the physical world. So from the beginning, we see a very interesting effort to make sure that we are constantly studying, constantly investigating, and constantly progressing in our comprehension of the world. And if we go back for a second, back in 1857, when it first started with the publication of the Spirits book in a lovely bookstore in the Palais Royal in France, we had this book, right? The Spirits book, which kicked off Spiritism. That's when it really started, April of 1857. But what's really interesting about it is that even though it was starting small with only 501 questions at that point in time, and now we have 1,019, it has really evolved. And I think that the Spirits book is an example of that itself. The 1,019 questions we now find in the seminal work of Spiritism really kept being evolved and matured and edited, on the second edition and the third edition, which is the one that we basically have nowadays. If you fast forward, right, to 2021, we are going to see that the Spirits book has those 1,019 questions. It is divided in 4 parts and has sold millions of copies. So in a very short period of time, went from something that was unknown to that it is worldwide and has a tremendous impact in millions of people. And that part I think we might be familiar with. But what I would love to call our attention to today, as we think about reflecting about our origins, our accomplishments, and our future, is that Spiritism has given us some really key and important learnings, right? That we all know and we talk about in our Spiritist study groups, in our conversations in the Spiritist Center, when we hear speakers and talks. And, I think some of the key learnings that we have of Spiritism, that it's things that are really central to Spiritism, right? That are ingrained in its DNA. First and foremost, obviously, is the immortality of the spirit. Because we had these conversations with the spirits themselves, that is, with the consciousness, with the essence of beings who had already lived in the physical world and who told us that they passed on to this new dimension of life, but that they did not cease to be who they were. We know as a fact that who we are, the immortal spirit that each one of us is, will never stop being. So that is an incredible, powerful awareness that Spiritism brought us that sort of begins to change our lives, because in many different ways, it takes the fear of death away. And the fear of death away, especially during a pandemic, it's a really powerful thing. And sometimes we don't even realize how much that impacts us. So, one of the main key learnings of Spiritism is that we are immortal spirits. And the second one, it's also very important, is that we actually also have the mechanism of reincarnation to help us evolve spiritually. So, the immortal spirit that we are has a chance to return to the physical realm as many times as necessary to take on a new shape, so to speak, a new gender, a new opportunity to learn and grow through time. And that has also been incredibly liberating for us spiritists because we begin to understand the world a lot better when we understand the idea of reincarnation. We are able to look at the world and say, aha, it seems pretty unfair, but when I understand there are causes and consequences that carry over from one lifetime to the next, the physical world outside, it doesn't seem as unjust as I thought. It's kind of like when we have a chance to watch the whole series on Netflix, we understand things better, right? Rather than just watching chapter 7 of the second season of the show that we like. Because we know there's continuity, because we know that there's one chapter after the other, we are not lost in the big scheme of things because we see that reincarnation is this factor that lets us go from one episode to the next. And then we know that episode number 7 has all these challenges and plot that were really brought about by episode number 6. Much the same way that we know that the challenges in our lives and in other people's lives sometimes are created here in this lifetime, but sometimes come from challenges from the before. And of course, we know all of that through mediumship. And I think that's a really powerful part of the DNA of Spiritism is this idea that we have been investigating how this contact between the world of the so-called living, the physical world, and the world of the spirits connect. And how is it that we can interact with them through this quality, through this ability that all of us have called mediumship. So I think that's a third key point there that we always talk about in Spiritism. And I'm sure I'm talking and preaching to the choir when I say this because you're familiar with this. But of course, we also want to make sure that we talk about the importance of the concept of God. That's another key part of Spiritism. That shouldn't surprise you, I hope. There is this orchestrating force of the universe and beyond, everything there is, that brings order to everything that which we call God. And that there is a God. And the way we know that there is a God is because we observe and see that there's consequences and actions. As you can understand, we in Spiritism are really big on cause and consequences and examining how they relate to each other. I think you got that by now. But God is also a very central and important piece because it helps us anchor ourselves to the idea that there is an order to the large act of the universe. And as such, then, if there is order and if there is justice, which we also see through incarnation, which we have learned through mediumship, which speaks about the immortality of the spirit, we need not be so afraid of the world in general because everything is going to be okay if we keep doing our best. Right? So God is an important component too because he helps dictate our behavior and our conduct. If we believe that there is justice, there is a fair force out there in the universe, then we don't need to take advantage of each other right now. We can simply do the best we can and know that everybody is going to be provided for. And of course, one of the great lessons that we learn is that we have this incredible spirit, really highly elevated spirit, so elevated that it's hard for us to understand, whom we call Jesus, who is the best model and guide for our living in a way that is spiritual and wholesome. Now, it is not the only guide. Let's make sure we're very clear about this. There's a plethora. There's so many guides out there that we can, and examples that we can emulate. It just so happened that in Spiritism, we focus quite a bit in Jesus because it is a fantastic model. It's the best model we believe we have had here on earth. But we're always interested in other models. So we value the input and the legacy of many different great missionaries that have come. I myself am fascinated by the teachings, for instance, of the Buddha. And there's so many wonderful people like Gandhi that we also pay attention to and care about. But in a jiffy, right? In the core piece of it, if I were asked, like, what's the core of Spiritism? What are the main teachings that Spiritism brings us? I would probably say the immortality of the spirit, reincarnation, mediumship, God, and Jesus as the best guide. And I think the last part, Jesus as the best guide, may have been better illustrated by all our dancing and singing friends in the video that you saw before I had a chance to come and talk to you. It was just really amazing out there. But why do I say that? I say that because we often think about Spiritism. We often think about Spiritism as a tool or a body of knowledge that gives us content, that gives us this information that we are learning or want to learn. And that is true. But what I want to do today is invite us to think a little bit deeper about Spiritism, and not just as a couple of books or 100 books or 1,000 books or content, but a way of looking at the world. Spiritism also is a mindset. It also is a method in which we can acquire knowledge. And so what I want to do is to say yes to all those key points that we talked about, but more significantly, Spiritism brings us a new way of thinking about spirituality and the world around us. How so? Well, think here with me. You might remember the story about Spiritism, right? Kardec went into different places. As a matter of fact, right in the beginning, Kardec, who was still then known as Professor Rivel, a very well-known researcher at the time, an educator, was asked by some friends to go ahead and investigate this strange phenomena taking place in salons and throughout France and Paris, more specifically. Tables were moving, they were knocking, they were shaking without human interaction. And of course, that was quite the rage because that time they didn't have Netflix. So folks would have to find things to do, and they would go to salon and the seances and try to entertain themselves, of course. And our educator friend, Professor Rivel, said, I don't have time for these futilities, for these things. I really don't want to pay attention to this. I've got all this work here. But his friends insisted. And he eventually went to a couple of meetings to basically find out what was happening so that he could check off his things to do, be kind to his friends, and move on to his work. And what happened was he saw that the tables were moving and answering questions in a way that was uncommon. Because after all, tables don't have brains or nervous systems. They cannot obey commands. So he quickly realized, using his really powerful intellect, that there had to be something behind those tables, an intelligence that moves that table according to the questions that were asked. If every cause, right, yields a consequence, then every consequence that it's intelligent must have an intelligent cause. That's a really long way of saying, if the table is answering commands and the table does not have a brain, then whoever is moving that table has to have a brain and understand those commands. Whoever is moving that table has to be an intelligent being. And just because we're not seeing that being, just because that being is invisible, it doesn't mean that being does not exist. And that is in fact true. We've come into spirits. That's how we began. He went around different meetings and began to ask all these questions from different mediums, from different people, to try to get information and see how they mesh together. And that's how the Spirits book came about. But that you knew, I'm sure. But what's more interesting is that there is a process that took place here that was very unheard of when it came to grabbing new information, for spiritual purposes. And what is that I'm talking about? Well, oops, I think I just clicked the wrong place here. Spiritism was born of inquiry. In the DNA of Spiritism, We have this driving force to ask questions. We want to know why things are the way they are. Kardec went into the meeting wanting to understand what was happening. He asked questions, he probed, he thought about it, he reflected. And it's also fact based. And it's one of the first, and if not the first, body of knowledge concerned with spirituality that is wondering what's actually happened scientifically. How do we measure and how do we make sense? It's not about what does one person think about it, but what are the facts about that piece. So the DNA of Spiritism has that sense of inquiry. It is facts based and it's also progressive. And what does that mean? It means that it's always moving forward. Just like Kardec, continue to ask those questions and get those answers and evolve that understanding, we too may want to think about how we are evolving our understanding. Because as the Spirit's book, first edition, we saw 500 questions, second edition, more questions, third edition, 1,000 questions. It kept growing and it keeps growing to this day. We have hundreds of books that we read in our study groups. We talked about in the Spiritist centers. We read at home to try to learn more. Spiritism is no longer just a Spirit's book. It's progressive. It keeps growing. And it's also open source and collaborative. It means that anybody can chime in and add to it. And that's fundamentally different than any other spiritual thinking process that sometimes we find around, where only a few people have the authority to say, this is what it is. In Spiritism, there is no authority. There is no centralized hierarchy. You get to collaborate, work together with other people to find out what works for you. It is flat and democratic, apologies, which means that it is really about the scientific method of finding one piece of information here and seeing if you find it again in a different place. Because if you do, if it starts popping out everywhere, then it's likely that that is indeed a true message, right? If something is found in many different places, then it must be true. And that's sort of like what the scientific process does. So this new thinking method that Spiritism brings to the mix is fundamentally different than any other kind of thinking that had been applied until then, until 1857, to any knowledge that we had of the spiritual world. If you think about it, every religion out there tells us that there is an afterlife, but they basically say, trust me on that. And they don't go more into the details about what it looks like. Spiritism starts right there, however, and says, well, we know there's an afterlife because we saw these interactions with the spirits, and we continue to investigate through our mediumistic work, and we are able to understand that not only that there is an afterlife, but that it actually looks like this or that, depending on what we do. And why do I say all of that? Well, because it's practical for everyday use. Once we understand how things work, we must necessarily make use in our daily lives. If we know there's an afterlife, we must change the way we act. Maybe it doesn't make sense anymore for me to step on you and shove you aside so I can get somewhere fast, because I will have to deal with you even after this lifetime. So it begins to change our behavior in a very practical way. We're not just waiting to die and go to heaven or hell. We are working ourselves constantly because we know that there is reincarnation and we're going to come back here as many times as we need to. So might as well do the work now. So it's very applicable to our everyday life. So, but why does it matter for now? It matters now because in the DNA of Spiritism is this idea that we are born of inquiry, that everything starts with questions. Spiritism started with questions. And so for us, we ask ourselves, do we still feed that curiosity in us? Are we still nourishing that desire to know that's in us? Now that you've been doing this for 15 years, together, how do you spark that curiosity? How do you remember that the whole of Spiritism started with questioning? It's okay to question things in Spiritism. That's actually how it all started. So, are we also applying that to our lives? Are we also questioning in a polite and kind way What is it that we are doing? What is it that we want for us? What is it that we want for the next 15 years of Seeds of Light? Are we still sparking that desire to know, or have we settled a little bit into, uh, I'm good. I've been doing this for a couple of years now, and I think I'm okay. I'm just gonna kind of hit the cruise control and keep on going. What are we doing? We have to feed that sense of curiosity, because in Spiritism, there is no cruise control. And that's why our Spiritist groups are always offering new study groups. They are inviting us to have a chance to participate and volunteer in different ways, so that we don't settle into the inertia that sometimes kicks in, which is not part of the DNA of Spiritism. Imagine if Kardec had gone to one or two meetings and then stopped right there. We wouldn't have all the wonderful work that he has put forth, and he wouldn't spark so much inspiration and so many ideas for all of us. So there is a constant desire to know more. That's one of the key factors of the DNA of Spiritism that sometimes we have to remind ourselves of. Another one, another one is that it's facts based. And that is an incredibly important one in this world that we live in. Because now, as you might know, everybody has this idea that it's okay to believe in whatever you want to believe, and it is. But there's also facts that we cannot walk around. Things are because they are. There are certain laws of nature that we cannot circumvent. So, the idea that we should be looking for facts to build upon, it's a very important one, because it tells us that in Spiritism, we are always observing. We are always paying attention to the world, and we're always trying to make connections between one thing over here and one thing over here. We're always trying to continue to build this body of knowledge and get this new layers of information, so that we can grow in our understanding of things, so it's easier for us to do things, to transform ourselves. And so today, the DNA of Spiritism is inviting us to ask ourselves if our approach to our lives and to the study that we do is facts based. If we are looking for information and questioning ourselves, how do I know that that is true? Where do I find it? What is my source? Can I trust that source? Should I not trust that source until I have more evidence that corroborates that source? It's a very important question that Spiritism keeps whispering in our ears, that we take a pragmatic approach to the world and not accept things until we have enough of a foundation to move forward. And I'm babbling here, but we're going to have time to talk. And I think it's also important for us to remember that a key part of that DNA is that it's progressive and that it's always mutating and growing. And so we ask ourselves too, are our studies about Spiritism also leading us to be growing and changing? Are we building on the previous knowledge that we had before so that we can continue to grow? Are we reading new books? Are we stretching ourselves beyond our comfort zones? Are we looking into new areas that we didn't before? Are we talking to different people that may be able to give us different perspective? Do we know more today than we did yesterday? Because Spiritism, it's always progressive. It's always growing. We started with Kardec. Now we have wonderful books by Andre Lewis, by Joanna de Angelis, by Emmanuel, by so many incredibly enlightening authors that show us that this knowledge continues to grow. And so we ask ourselves if we are doing the same thing in our lives. Are we following that example that Spiritism gives us to tell us that we too need to stretch ourselves beyond our comfort zones? Maybe it's really great to always go and listen to the talks of the Spiritist Center, and that is true, really wonder. But maybe this is the time for you to also go and take part in that study group, or maybe this is an opportunity for you to volunteer for another activity so that you can learn something new. There are different ways of learning and growing. And as you continue to expand after 15 beautiful years, there's tons of work that could be done at the Spiritist group that's just waiting for a volunteer to step forward. So, so Spiritism asks us to be progressive, to stretch ourselves, and maybe to embrace new things that we might not be completely comfortable with. But that's how we grow, by tackling them, by playing with them, by trying new things, by making mistakes, by building on what we know, and growing and being better. So that's another aspect of the DNA of Spiritism that is always very interesting. And of course, another very important one is that it's open source, that Spiritism is collaborative by nature. The way that Kardec came onto the Spirits book was by engaging different mediums in different sessions in different places and getting that information on. He could never have done that by himself. That's why it's not even his work, it's the Spirit's work. It's called Spiritism and not Kardecism. It's also called the Spirit's book and not Kardec's book, is because it's not his work. It's way beyond that. He was the editor and to put things together. But the amount of people that came together in this side of life and on the other side, the spiritual side of life, to make that happen was incredible. And that was an incredibly collaborative process. And collaborative process sometimes are difficult because we have to talk with other people. We have to make sense of other things. But the good news is that it is open to all. And so we ask ourselves, again, one more time, we hear Spiritism whispering in our ears. Are we also open source in our lives? Are we also listening to other people? Are we taking input from the outside? Are we working in a collaborative manner to grow our understanding? The DNA of Spiritism suggests that that is an important piece for all of us. Not just an abstract concept for Spiritism, but in our lives too. Are we engaging with new people? Are we listening to different perspectives? Because I think we can agree that the world is a pretty polarized place out there. It's not very open source. People hang on to this truth here, and they don't share with this people here. And this people here don't share with this people here. And what happens? They bump heads, and we have all this conflict. But if we were able to hear, if we were able to talk and not take things too personally, but really engage in openness, maybe we might find ourselves a lot closer to each other than we are today. So, are we being open with ourselves? Are we taking a inclusive posture to our lives? Are we inviting different people and different opportunities? Are we sharing with others what we do? That's an important question as well that we may want to pay attention to as we are revisiting the role of Spiritism in our lives. I know there's a lot here, but hopefully we get to talk a little bit about it together. Another interesting part here is that Spiritism is flat and democratic. I keep saying demographic, but I mean democratic. I was just working and doing some demographics, and that's why this keeps popping up. But it's very important for us to kind of pay attention to this too, because Spiritism has no owner, has no boss. As much as sometimes we would like to be the boss of things, Spiritism was conceived in that manner to prevent us from being stationary, stuck, congealed, crystallized in one specific way. Because the moment that there is a boss, the moment that there is a owner, then things stop growing and they start to slowly get fixated in one specific way. Spiritism is here to exactly elicit this sense of inquiry that we talked about, this sense of growth. And so there is no owner in Spiritism, which means you are also an owner of Spiritism. All of us are. Everybody can add to Spiritism every single day. If you have a new idea, if you have a new theory, you share that with others. And if enough people corroborate and agree with you, then it becomes part of Spiritism. And that's a beautiful thing. And that's a pretty rare thing in the world today. This true collaboration in the sense of democratic partnership here, especially considering spirituality in general, right? Because we know that many times there are so many schools of thought that deal with spirituality. They have so many wonderful ideas. But then after a while, because they have one leader or another leader that's very particular about things, they stop growing. and they become fixated in one little thing. And eventually, with time, they lose their power. They lose their call to our hearts. And people sometimes get, um, sad about it, and they stop following those people or those religions because they feel like it's become about a certain group of people and not everybody. And we were talking about Jesus earlier. Jesus was a great, model of inclusivity, right? He talked to everybody. He was with everybody. He didn't turn anybody away. And that's the kind of of mindset that we want to bring into our studies, into our lives as well. So the question that keeps asking itself is, how flat and democratic are we in our spiritist practice? Are we being inclusive? Are we reminding ourselves that we may have roles within the Spiritist center, even in the Spiritist movement, or even in our lives and families? But these are just temporary roles, because now we know that we're immortal spirits. So, how can we be good stewards of the responsibilities that we have and still be opening and accepting of other people? Now, being open and accepting of other people, of course, means listening to them. It doesn't mean that we get to do everything they want, right? Let's just be clear about this. But it's important to be open and to understand that in Spiritism, your voice counts, your voice matters. And that's why we want you to get engaged. That's why we want you to come and help, volunteer, offer to take on some of the duties. There's so many different ways in which you can help, because it is a labor of love. Nobody gets paid in Spiritism because there are no owners. There is no hierarchy. All those people that you see on lives or that work in their Spiritist group and that have helped you survive for 15 years, they've done that out of the kindness of their heart. And that is an incredible accomplishment in itself. And it's practical. Spiritism has to be practical. If it is not practical, it doesn't serve a purpose, right? Because its definition, as we saw, is to bring light into who we are and how the spiritual relates to the physical. If we can't tell how that works, then there's little point of studying it. So because it is practical, it has to answer our questions. It has to be applied to our everyday life. And this sometimes is hard because somehow in our heads, we have built at times this idea that we go to the Spiritist Center on a Sunday, or we Zoom in on a Wednesday, right? And then I do it for an hour and then I go back to my life. But they're all one and the same. So what you learn in Spiritism is supposed to help you. One practical example. We have just been going through this incredible pandemic, and you might remember how scared we were in the beginning when we had less information about this virus. Everybody was doing all kinds of things, including stocking toilet paper. That I never understood, because after all, the COVID-19 virus has nothing to do with our stomachs, right? So there was no reason for us to be hogging toilet paper. But we became so anxious about everything that we began, doing things that doesn't make sense. Now, if instead we all had an opportunity to lean into our Spiritist knowledge and know that, this is a serious thing that we need to address. It's very important that we take care of ourselves. But in the case that we do get really sick and even lose our physical lives, guess what? We are not going to stop being who we are. We are still going to love and be loved by our loved ones. It's going to suck a little bit, right? But we never lose people. We just are temporarily aside. And so Spiritism has brought to us the ability to be less fearful of death, because we talk to the spirits. We know they continue living on every single day. So what kind of questions have you had answered by Spiritism that have helped you understand who you are today and what challenges you're facing? There's so many of them that I bet that you could think about a couple of examples. And if we had more time, we would do that. Maybe we can do that together later on as well. But my point here is it has to apply to our daily lives, right? So, long story short, as you look through all of this that we talked about, and as you begin to kind of take stock, not only of the changes that Spiritism has gone through and its entire cycle so forth in just this 100 and and 60, 70, 80 years of age, what kind of cycles do you also see in this 15 years of incredible work that you guys have done at Seeds of Light? You are truly sowing seeds of light, right? And the question that wants also to be answered is, what's ahead? If we are going to look at the example of a DNA and carry that motif, that theme forward, we ask ourselves, what's next? And we know that the DNA, our DNA in our physical bodies, influences who we are, but it doesn't determine who we are. We may come with certain tendencies for some things, but not everything can be explained by our physical bodies, by our physical DNA. In Spiritism, that's also the case. You also have a choice. Your future is not written down and it's not immutable. You have a chance to decide what is it and how you want to be. And that's a very important awareness to hang on to. And the second piece is the DNA is individual, but it's shared. You have your DNA, I have my DNA, but we all come from a common DNA. So in Spiritism, we also have this common history, but it's also up to us, to each one of us, to put a little bit of work in and to pass it on to the next generation. Because the DNA that we carry in our physical bodies is always mutating. That means it's always changing. We pass our DNA to the next generation, and the DNA changes, and they pass it on to the next generation in a great relay race. Our bodies get better with time. They grow, they change. Now we walk erect. 2,000 years ago, we had different feelings. 200 years ago, we were not even walking, in many different ways. So we are in physical bodies and ourselves. So we can ask ourselves too, how are you going to change for tomorrow? How are you going to be different? What kind of DNA do you want to pass it on to the next generation? It's nice to look at where we came from because that tells the past, but it doesn't tell us what is it that we are going to do in the future. So what are you going to do in the next 15 years of Seeds of Light? What are you going to do in the next week of your life? How is it that what you have learned about the immortal spirit that you are and the fact that you are so loved by God beyond your ability even to comprehend it, and that you have so much love from your loved ones in the afterlife or in the spiritual world, or whatever you want to call it, and for many more spirits that you don't even remember from past lives, there's an incredible amount of love flowing to you right now from people around you and people you don't see. So what you going to do with all of that? Well, what kind of wonderful things are you going to create in this new future ahead of you? There's so many things that are going to be ahead of you and that you're going to be able to pass it on to other people. So as you think about where you've come from in this 15 years, think back also to the origin of Spiritism and how it is really made of different components. How in many different ways it was a adventure of curiosity, of questioning, of looking at the different ways, of collaborating with different people, of getting to know more things, of fact finding, adding to your life, and constantly iterating, asking new questions, making mistakes, fixing it. It's been an incredible journey of understanding that has led us to the understanding of life in a bigger prism, in a way of spirituality in general. And now we know that we are immortal spirits that are never going to stop being who we are. And those that we love and that are around us are never going to cease to be either. Isn't that incredibly reassuring to know that the people that you love would always love you and would always be with you, even if you can't see them? That's an incredibly powerful knowledge that could be transformative for us. It could transform us, make us less anxious for the day to day, make us less anxious about death, and calming us down so that we can roll up our sleeves and work. So I'm really excited to congratulate you, if I can, as a friend from the other side of the country, on this incredible milestone that all of you have achieved. 15 years of this labor of love that God knows has required so many hours of sacrifice from the workers that sometimes don't even get recognized by people. There's somebody who used to clean, right? They had to clean the Spiritist group. People who would have to fold the chairs. People who have to coordinate schedules. People that had to volunteer to help with the children. There's so many wonderful people doing wonderful things for themselves, but also for others. That is truly inspiring. They could all have been doing something else. They could all be watching TV. They could be going to the mall. And all these things are great. You can watch TV, go to the mall. But isn't it beautiful that they have decided to give a little bit of themselves, to pass a little bit of their DNA of service to others so that they can continue to learn and grow? It's amazing. I'm so touched by the devotion that takes place every single day, and that sometimes we don't get to see until we reach such important milestones such as this one. Congratulations, guys! 15 years. That's an incredible achievement. And I would love to congratulate you and all our friends who are always with us. I see Nick. I see Linda, Christina Mahler, which is always great to see your name as well. Marcus, so many wonderful people that have been part of this, and you supporting the group, even being on this live, it's a way of connecting as well. So I'm going to pause there and see if maybe you have any questions or comments or perspectives that you also want to share, so that we can make sure that this is a collaborative endeavor, right? So that we can kind of come together and cross-pollinate and share our ideas and perspectives and ask questions of each other. Aha, a question from Nick. Mr. Nick says, when you're speaking with someone who doesn't know about Spiritism and the word medium comes up, how do you tactfully differentiate and separate Spiritist mediums from the prophet seekers and charlatans? That's a great question. So interesting curiosity here. I don't know if we know this, but the first time that the word medium comes up and the extent that it relates to communication with the spiritual world is in Kardec's work. So before that, we did not have the word mediums, but we do have mediumship. Mediumship has always been there, right? So we have like shamans, prophets, all these other titles and descriptors that have always been there. So I think that the fact that that mediumship exists doesn't mean that every medium behaves obviously in a spiritist way, right? And so it's always a hard conversation to have, because people also confuse sometimes mediums with psychics, right? And say, oh, is that a psychic? Is that a medium? What's the difference? Well, technically, a psychic is using their own abilities to arrive at some point of information, right? So they would say psychometry, which is a kind of ability where you can hold an object and feel the vibrations of whoever held it before, and you can describe them. That's not technically mediumship. That's psychometry, right? And so that's being a psychic in many different ways. A medium is when you're being an intermediary between two realms of life, which means you're actually getting to converse or talk with the spiritual world. So when people bring the mediums, it's always a difficult conversation to preface, but I'll say, well, there are mediums in the spiritualist tradition, and there is a spiritist tradition of mediumship, which is slightly different. In the Spiritist tradition, for instance, we don't believe in taking payment for mediumistic work. And this is no dig whatsoever in our spiritualist brothers. We believe in free will, and people have a choice to do whatever it is that they want to. But we Spiritists like to hold sort of a higher bar when it comes to mediumship, because we understand that the mediums, they are the intermediary, as the word describes, between the two worlds. So it doesn't make sense for us to charge, right, for seances or for readings, because it's not our work. We're just part of it. We cannot charge for the work of somebody else. It's sort of like me going to somebody else and selling your car, right? I didn't ask for you. I didn't ask you if I could sell your car to somebody else, but in a way, I'm obviously exaggerating. So I would go about and say, yeah, that's interesting, but Spiritism, it's something that we treat a little bit differently, if that makes sense. But it might require a little bit of context. But I would say, oh, yeah, that's true. There are some mediums who are charlatans, right? But because there are mediums who are not very straightforward or perhaps even honest with what they do, doesn't mean that all mediums are charlatans, right? So it's an important conversation to be had, and one that I hope you approach with tactfulness and a lot of patience, because people don't know the difference, and a lot of times people won't even know what spiritism is. So you might want to back up a little bit and explain a little bit that spiritism is a body of knowledge that studies spirituality and the spirit and how it relates to the physical world before you have the conversation. But Nick, I presume that you might be bumping into that more often, right? Because I think all of us are beginning more and more to get asked about those questions too. So I don't know if that helps. Yeah, Marco says, give free what was given free to you. That is very true. But again, the important thing too, if I may, just kind of one more thing too, I think sometimes we spiritists get a little bit snobby on that part, and we say, oh, you can't charge for mediumship. No, listen, you can do whatever it is, so much so that people actually charge for mediumship, right? The difference is that we don't choose to do it. We're not going to tell people, when we're not going to pass judgment on other people who do it, because we don't believe in passing judgment, right? But we choose to act differently for ourselves. So to the extent that we can, I would invite you to make sure that we are not passing judgment on other people who might choose to do things differently, especially because they might not have had a chance to be exposed to all this knowledge about mediumship that we have. I don't know if you ever thought about this, but it is in the Medium's book, right? The second book that Kardec brought together, that we find the first treatise on mediumship ever written. Nobody that I know of in the history of humanity had ever written a work on how to become a medium or how he actually works before Kardec and the Medium's book, right? Think about this, monumental. Remember how we're talking about democratizing and open source? Well, Kardec got all this information in the Spirit's book, and then book number 2 was the Medium's book. And the Medium's book teaches how to get the information in book number 1. Had Kardec been selfish, he would never have shared the second book, and he would have kept all the knowledge to himself, so people would have to come to him, so that they have asked questions to him about mediumship. But no, he put it out there so that we could learn how that works. So that's always a way to go, right? Does that make sense? So I think that we're going to have a lot of those questions about mediumship in general. And here we have our very talented and very kind Janaina. Thank you for joining me, Jana. And you're on mute. And that's the sentence of 2020. We've all done it. I do it all day long. I start talking without unmuting myself.
Okay, I am muted now that I see. Okay. Well, I was listening to you, and I made a few little notes myself here. And when you were talking about the key learning points, how, like, Nick made a great question. And sometimes I always think about, how can I express myself, like, to family members who are not spiritists, that don't know anything about, and maybe sometimes judge a little I don't want to say that they judge all the way, but they don't know. And sometimes it's like there is a wall, but just by reading the key points, the immortality of the soul, other religions also believe in that. And
Mm-hmm.
then mediumship, there is also in the
Mm-hmm.
forms of the prophets. And so I see that we actually have most in common, but how to connect the two dots without bumping heads, I guess that's my
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, I love that, because I think that's a question that we see quite often, Jenna, right? Because Spiritism is so new. It only has been around for about, what we're talking here, about 160 years, right? Thereabouts. So if you think about it, most of us only have had one chance. Like, this is the first incarnation that we have been exposed to Spiritism, right? Because last time we were on Earth, like in our previous incarnation, chances are we didn't get exposed to Spiritism. So we're still learning how to do it, and we're still learning how to talk about it. But that's a very great question. And that's why it's so wonderful to go back to the beginning, like the way and to the origins of Spiritism, right? So Spiritism was and is a search for understanding. So I think It's great for us to practice, like, how do I introduce that to other people? And I would say that at the end of the day, that definition that Kardec gave us, right, it's a science which deals with the nature and origin, destiny of spirits, and all that kind of good stuff. Um, it's really powerful. You can even simplify. Well, in Spiritism, we really study the spirit and what it is to be an immortal spirit, and how does that relate to our everyday life at the end of the day, right? And those key points, I think, are very helpful too, because we say, a couple of things that we believe in: immortality of the soul. I think pretty much every religion's going to say, yes, we agree that life goes on, right? What sometimes is a little bit different about us is that we deal with reincarnation. Not everybody does reincarnation, right? And it's very rare for you to find reincarnation within the Christian tradition too. That's a little bit different. But we do immortality of the soul, reincarnation, mediumship, and God, right? And Jesus. So we might even start with God right there in the beginning. Well, we believe in God, we believe in immortality of the soul, we believe in being good and kind, and we also believe in mediumship, that you can interact. So there are different ways that I think you can kind of tailor to whoever you are talking about. But don't feel surprised if it feels a little awkward and a little different, because it's not that common, right? It's a really known piece. So part of it might be your own nervousness, but it's also the fact that it hasn't been explained to everybody, right? So like in Brazil, right, or in France, for instance, people have more context. But in the rest of the world, we're still going to have to do quite a bit of explaining, because people just don't know what it is. And that's okay too, right?
That's right, because it's brand new. I mean,
It's new.
compared to, it's like the last iOS, update from.
Yes, exactly what it is, right, Jenna? I mean, it seems like 160 years, 170 years is a really long time from one lifetime. But if you think about it, all the different incarnations, we bring our habits from so many different lifetimes that we're still stuck on a couple of things. I mean, Christianity has been around for 2,000 years, right, in general. And before that, we have Judaism, who has been even longer. So 150 years is not even 10% of that period, right? It's really a short period of time. So we are on iOS, 18, and we haven't had a chance to go from 1 to 17, right? So it takes time to get used to it. We're doing things differently sometimes.
That's right. And I also made a little note to myself, something that I always love about Kardec, and we always mention within our studies, is how, you know, he was always based on facts. And, he would study a subject, and until he was sure about it, or, the spirits, give the okay, he would not simply say, oh, here it is, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
He would keep that information, study, exchange letters, because that's another cool thing.
Yeah.
Today we exchange text messages, video calls. Back then,
Yeah.
he would receive how many letters, to get all that information and go through study. And so studying is a huge part of spiritism. So what is
Yes.
your take with, about studying, like how
Oh,
important it is? And
I love it, Jonah, because it's like that's the DNA of Spiritism, is that search, is that study process, right? If we just look at Kardec, right, after he's gone through his whole process, which he's studying different mediums, he's studying different phenomena, he realizes there's all these things. He starts to put this together. He publishes a Spirits book, but he also publishes, and we sometimes don't think about this, the Spiritist magazine. And as he's publishing, right, so what's happening? He's getting this new information, and he's writing these essays, and he's putting in the Spiritist magazine that goes out every month, or used to go out every month when he was, right? It still goes out, but anyways. And in the magazine, he puts it out. People give feedback. He takes it back. He gets better at it, and then that stuff makes into the books. Sometimes when we see the books, we don't realize that a lot of those materials can actually be found in a not so great form just yet in the magazine, because he had an idea, he studied it, he put it forth in the magazine, people reply, said yes, no, how about this? He gets it better, and then he finally publishes it. And I think that's something about that. that we ought to think about as well. One is that he studied, he was courageous to put it out there, and he was also very courageous and open to feedback and growing, right? So in Spiritism, it will be very hard for us to go anywhere if we are not studying, right? And I don't mean that you need to buy textbooks and sit down and do homework, right? That's not what we mean. We mean is you have to continue to explore and put some time into it. And this is perhaps an unpopular opinion, Jonah, but I'm going to say it anyways, right? And sometimes we've gotten so accustomed because Spiritism is so new. We just talked about this, right? For the past 2,000 years, sometimes we have been going to a place of worship, going to a place of spirituality, and we have been accustomed to listening to people. And then they are done talking, and then we go back home, right?
Mhm.
That is nice. There's nothing wrong with that. But what I hope we're being called to is to take it a step further and say, how can I go deeper into that? What else can I read? Can I talk to other people? So coming to our talks and lectures are really nice. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But wouldn't you grow a lot more if you took that extra hour a week to be part of that study group? Because I might have ideas that are in one specific way. And when I talk to Janaina and during our conversation, she points out also something else. And I'm like, oh, I didn't think about that. And so now I have just received the gift of her perspective that I would never have gotten if I had not interacted with her. So study is a wonderful thing. So you can study the content, but I would also suggest that you can, right? Go to the Spiritist group or be part of a Spiritist group, study group, because then you have the benefit of other people's experiences. Now, you might not agree with what they say sometimes, and that's okay too. But you have
Mhm.
been gifted the gift of a different perspective. Sometimes somebody will say something and you say, wow, that's amazing. And sometimes you'll say, no, I don't think I agree with that. But even when you don't agree, you are learning something new. Maybe you're getting more validation of what you believed in the first place, right? So the DNA of Spiritism is that search for knowledge. And that search for knowledge can only come through study. So we have, if we really want to be truthful to the Spiritist idea, the origins and the DNA, we have to put a little bit more effort and time in there and do a little bit of study.
Yes. And I was just talking to Patricia, one of our workers and fellow friends today about, how can we, uh, as we come back next year, we are going to reopen in January. We're planning to reopen third week of January. And then we're thinking, okay, what can we do in the studies, that will be uh, just like Linda and Juliana, I mean, they really took to the next level. So how can we do, something that will also bring interest? Because we understand people are always, they have their family work, and most of the time they may go straight from work. And
Mhm.
so we want to make sure that it's a solid, study based on the books, but also that it's, brings that curi how do you say
Curiosity,
yes,
right?
thank you. And so they can, they have that desire to learn, or to ask, and know that asking question is okay. We love Christina, who's here also. We have our meetings on Thursday, and sometimes we spend maybe like 40% of the meeting, talking back and forth about a question from the Spirit's book. And then every person brings a perspective. And it's interesting, even if we do not agree, our mind is open for something that we never thought before. And so that's how we love the studies. And we invite everyone who's listening to us, to join us, as our studies will remain hybrid, in person and on Zoom. So for the ones who can come and join us will be great. The ones who are, still cannot join in person, they can still do the Zoom meetings. So that will be great.
Wonderful. Yeah, wonderful. And that's a challenge that everybody's dealing with, right? All Spiritist groups and even beyond. So, so the pandemic has given us many different gifts, right? And many different challenges for sure. There's been a lot of suffering and pain, and we got to acknowledge that. but he has also pushed us to think differently, right? Even about spiritism and the spiritist groups. So that's a great thing you guys are doing. And there is no right answer just yet. It's okay to experiment with a format that works for the group, right? Because that is true. Some people will be able to be in person, some people will not. And maybe there's some people who are not even close to you, right? They kind of stumbled upon you virtually during the pandemic and they live in a different country, right? But the fact that you guys are trying things out is very spiritist like, right? Try it out, the format, ask people for feedback, and then adjust. There isn't a right or wrong answer how to carry on study group. Is what works for you, but it will take experimentation, right? It will
Yeah.
take testing, and it's okay. That's what we do, right? And you're going to reincarnate that idea many different times, right? You're going to try something for a little bit. Does it work? Great, keep doing it. Doesn't work? Change it. And I think that that interaction between people is really the next level of awesomeness, right? Because having the chance to have this conversation. I mean, look at us, Jenna. I think we are about, I don't know, maybe like 3,000 miles apart from each other, right? But we can have a conversation on such
We're
important
right here
topics like this,
together.
right here in this little box, right? So yay for technology, right? That lets us include each other. It's going to be tricky. We're going to struggle when doing the hybrid for a little bit. It's going to feel awkward, right? And let's call it out. But it's okay because you're trying, and that's what it. If people that we're going to ask people every once in a while, is it working for you or works better? And you just kind of keep tailing, but keep
Yeah.
going, right? We can't go back.
And something a thought just crossed my mind, how amazing it is that today, 2021, we have so many materials that we can use for our studies, especially for the ones in English. 20 years ago, what did we have as far as, books and articles? Uh, Almost nothing. So,
Mhm.
and nowadays we have so many translated books, great materials that we're able to use in the studies, or as a complement. And that is, I love that.
Yeah. It's part of that growing, right? We're talking about being a progressive piece. We're also growing and learning, and we're translating, we're creating more things. That's a wonderful thing. And tomorrow we're going to have even more. And I think the challenge soon enough is not going to be, do we have any material? Is what's the best material for us? Because there's going to be so much that we're going to have to figure it out. To which one do we want to use? Because we only have so much time. Maybe you're going to have to make more study groups because there's so many books and so many different things to talk about, right?
Yes.
But I love it.
Well, we have a comment from our dear Priscilla, who moved away but is still join us, virtually. And do you want to read her comment?
Yes, Priscilla, I think you nailed it. That's one of the reasons I came to Spiritism, the question that had and couldn't get the answers, right? With Spiritism, there's answers. And I'm very much the same way. I was a kind of kid that when you told me when I was little, like you had to do this just because, I would ask you why. And if you told me just because, I wouldn't do it, right? Just because I was a little rebel, right? I think we all know these people. But I think that Priscilla's point is it's fantastic. I think it speaks to the DNA of Spiritism, right? We have come to Spiritism for answers. And Spiritism gives us answers because it's willing to explore. It's really to build on things. It's really to look for the facts and make those connections. And it's also very much okay to say, I don't know that answer. Let's look at it together. Because it's such a big, beautiful body of knowledge that touches so many things. There is no way that one single person can know it all, right? So I think it's very okay for us to acknowledge that part of being a spiritist is saying, I don't know, but let's find out, right?
That's
We don't
right.
have to have the answers to everything, but just have to have the willingness to kind of find out. Many times somebody might ask you a question, it's like, I don't know. Let's look for somebody that knows. Our job as facilitators or spiritist group leaders is not to have all the answers. It's just to provide the forum, the place for people to find their answers, right? And I think that's the beauty of a spiritist group. This is a place where you go and you find answers to things, or you find people who can point you to the answers. It's just a beautiful place, just a beautiful thing. So take some of the pressure off, spiritist leaders. You don't have to have all the answers.
Oh, then, well, I don't think we have any other questions. If anyone who's listening to us, now it's the time because we're going to wrap it up soon. And then it is such a pleasure, to have you after, I don't know, probably it's been what, 2 years since we had, no, I think last year you did one talk in English for us for our study group. So it's been about a year probably. And tomorrow we are having Dr. Alberto Almeida, and then Thursday we have Simon Pedro. So we invite all who are listening today, to join us. It's going to be in Portuguese. So we always like to do one day in English so we can, have our Americans and, who or the English speaking, participants in the center so they can join. And then we also have, the Portuguese ones. And then if you have any final remarks, I would like to ask you to do our final prayer, if you may.
Yes, it'll be my absolute pleasure. I think that the only thing that I want to remind you of that sometimes we get so busy, right, with our daily lives and there's so much going on, is that you forget sometimes, I forget sometimes, to celebrate the little victories that make the bigger victory. For 15 years, you guys have made little decisions every day. Do I go to group or do I stay home and do something else? Right.
Mm,
And sometimes we think these are like no big deals because we think that, we have to do big things to change the world. But those little decisions that you've made have been changing not only your lives without you realizing, but those around you. Congratulations, 15 years of a truly labor of like a true volunteer labor of love, right? 15 years, people. I mean, we saw some kids in those videos who are not 15 yet. They were not even born yet. And you guys are already working towards preparing the place so that they could find a way of getting closer to spirituality and learning about Christ in a way that is not chastising, that is not, right, constricting, that is very liberating. None of that could have been possible. That video by those kids could not have been possible were it not for the early workers of Seeds of Light. Congratulations. Like, the work that you do matters so much so that you are here 15 years ago. Maybe you weren't here, but now that DNA is also, you get to pass it on. So pass that torch. So congratulations. Even if you're not here, if you're feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome because you've only been at the group for a year, it's okay. You can take credit for the last 14 too. You're part of the team, right, John? It's okay for them
oh
too.
yes,
Yeah.
workers of the last hour. So it does not matter when you came, you're
You,
part of the
you get to be
family.
part of the team. Yeah.
Just like you, then, being all the way in California, you are, part of our Seeds of
Ah,
Light. So
I feel honored. And with that in mind, I think that if that's okay, we'll raise our thoughts up to our Creator
sure.
and be thankful for the chance that we have to be together here today, even if virtually, to remind ourselves of our spiritual essence. And in this particular moment, we want to thank our spiritual guides and mentors for Seeds of Light, for the forum that He has given us for the past 15 years, in which we could find answers, struggle with finding answers, asking ourselves who we are and how can we be better, finding that shoulder sometimes to cry on, making new friends, borrowing a book, finding books to learn and grow. We are so grateful for the opportunity that's given to us by God every single day to learn and grow. With that in mind, we wish that we may continue to receive that kind of inspiration and daily reminder to continue to apply ourselves to the search for truth and for happiness that comes from doing good things. So a special love to all our spiritual friends at the Seeds of Light Spiritist Society, both in the, as we said, spiritual side of things, but in the physical realm as well. And may you guys continue to thrive, and we'll continue to follow you at a distance here. So Our most sincere wish is that you continue to be inspired and inspire others. And thank you, God, for giving us the opportunity to be part of that work, even if remotely.
Thank you so much. Well, my friends, that's it for tonight. It was a really great night. For the ones who missed the video, go back to the beginning of the video. I believe it's about 10 minutes of the live. You will see the beautiful video of our little children. And as we go off, I'm going to leave the banner with the program for tomorrow and the next day. So thank you so much, Dan, for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you soon, maybe in person.
Love that. It'll be my
All
honor.
right. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.